gonna do the same thing I did with Chris with you, since before I got to really know him, I wanted to bring him in here and kind of get to know him a little better. And since we just now really kind of started hanging out and getting to know each other, I thought, like, this is a good time to do it. Let's get to know about Josh. So where were you born?
Believe it or not, I am an Austinite.
No way.
Yeah, I was born in Southwest Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Really,
how old are you?
I am 38. I'll be 39 in August. I was born west of Oak Hill, down literally right before Travis County turns to Hayes County off of 290. And we had a little 25-acre farm that I grew up on, which, you know, we had cows and pigs and chickens and a horse, and, you know, just the horse was my aunt and uncle's, but it was nice because it was community living. So it was like, we had like a 1-acre garden, which I wish I'd eaten more vegetables now as a kid.
I did that last time too.
But yeah, so my great grandparents, they were dairy farmers. That's what they did. And
in South Austin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So Eskew Lane is actually named after my family. So I'm a Preslar, who is my grandfather. His wife, Carolyn, was a Klingeman, and she was an only child, so therefore she had her dad's name. Well, her mom's name was Eskew. So Klingeman Automotive, that's all related to me. Eskew is, so when you're going down Brody and you are right past Matthews, there's Eskew Lane, where Boone Elementary and everything is. That was my family. So they used to own just under 500 acres right there.
Wow.
And in 1970, they sold and moved out and bought the 25 acres that we grew up on. So who all lived there was my family, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and my cousins, my aunt and uncle. So, you know, it was awesome. You know, grew up.
Wow.
Great-grandparents right there. They were around until I was a teenager.
Those caves are back there too, right? Like, there's probably a lot of more exploring able to do.
We
back
never
then.
found any caves on our property. I'm not sure if in that area right there was really any, but, you know, we had
like a Brody area.
Oh, in the Brody area. Yeah,
like that
for
Brody
sure.
and Mopac area.
Yeah, for sure. But where we grew up down 290 was the 25 acres.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, that Brody area, the house that my great-grandmother was born in is still there and still in the family. It was...
What's that? What's the address?
I don't know the address.
What's the street again? Is it Eskew?
It could be on Eskew. I don't honestly remember. But my dad's cousin is the one who owns the property now. But
is it still being lived in? And
they rent it out.
They do.
So it's not lived in by the family. It's a rental property for them now. But the old silo and everything from there is still there. There was a fire there at some point, so part of it got burnt down. But yeah, the old property is still there. And yeah, so we moved out, or they moved out. Of course, we came along as kids in the 80s, and yeah, life was awesome. You know.
Well, what'd you do in the 80s as a kid in Southwest Austin?
Well, I would have been 4 still in the 80s. So I was more of a 90s kid, but born in the 80s. So I was 86 was when I was born.
So I graduated in 91, so you were 5.
Yeah, I would have been 5. So
I don't feel that old.
No.
I don't.
That's good. Yeah, so, I mean, the thing that I loved about growing up on land was that, one, we had a creek that ran through the back of the property, so that was always fun. We had deer blinds all over and stuff like that because we hunted on the property, and we would just run all over the property. I mean, it was my sisters. I have 2 sisters and myself, and then my 2 cousins were on the property. So the 5 of us would just run all over.
Wow.
Probably do things we shouldn't have been doing. You know, they say, you know, a lot of city life, it was you stay out until the street lights come on. We didn't have street lights, so if sun starts going down, we had to get back. But, you know, it was just one of those things. Like, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah.
How I grew up.
Yeah.
We were close enough to the city that we still got all the kind of perks, quote unquote perks that you get from living in a city, but it was still a country lifestyle. And that's now what my wife and I our goal is to get back to, which
get back to the country.
May mean moving out of state at some point, but because Texas is too expensive.
It's expensive. Have you ever lived out of state? Did you ever?
No. My mom did. So my parents divorced when I was, 93. It was finalized on my birthday, actually. So I was turning. So I would guess I was 7. So yeah, 7, and then in 97 she moved out to California for 17 years. And that was fun. I mean, that's about as out of state as I've lived. Mm-hmm. My dad had custody, so mom got out there, and whenever we would get like 6 weeks during the summer, so we would camp our way out and then stay out there for a few weeks, then camp our way back. So that was pretty cool. But
it was fun.
A few weeks out of the year. That's about the extent I had about living out of town or out of state, I guess, if you will.
So did you go to Bowie High School?
I did. Yeah. I was a Bulldog, yeah.
What year did you graduate?
Class of 04.
Gosh, 04.
So you graduated in 91. You were South Austin. Would you have been Crockett?
Yeah, I was South Garland.
Okay.
Up in Garland, Texas. I moved here in 93. So I've been here.
You moved here after high school. Gotcha.
Yeah, right after high school. I went to Lubbock for a year for Texas Tech, and then hightailed it out of Lubbock.
Well, Nathan actually, he was a Bowie graduate too, but I think he was 93.
93.
If I'm not mistaken. He was born 78, so that's not right. 90. Is that math right?
No.
Yeah.
No, I was born in 72, so he would have been 6 years after me. He would have been about 96, 97.
95 maybe, 96, yeah. Somewhere in there. Either way. 78 plus 18, whatever you get there.
Mm-hmm. So I was here in Austin in the 90s when you were coming of age, I guess.
Yep.
I was still coming of age too. But
where were you living?
At first, North Austin, and then moved to Riverside, and then the longest time we spent was Ditmar. I lived a little all over South Austin, but Ditmar, Manchac area, and then Brody and Ditmar, Davis, right there.
Yeah.
And then here.
Yeah, so I grew up playing ball and stuff at Oak Hill, and
we moved here in 2015.
That was my stomping grounds. So
cool.
Yeah.
So what'd you do after high school?
After high school, let's see. I graduated from Bowie in 2004. Did a little bit of school. Did not finish school.
Me either. Wasn't for me.
Yeah. Same
here. I still continue to learn every day, but I couldn't sit in the classroom.
I look back sometimes and think, man, would life have been easier if I had gone ahead and finished through? Wife and I were actually talking about that a little bit today, but you know what? We each have our own path. So
right.
I was very ADD. I didn't want to school. I could be good in school. Mm-hmm. It just, I wanted to be outside. I didn't want to be stuck in a classroom. That's, now looking back, it's like I could have taken a little more advantage, could have read some more, done some more to just further my own out of school education. But I think most of the most of the jobs in the world, you don't truly need an education for. Right. It's just more, can you put in the work, And I was in that generation where it's like, oh, well, we want to see a degree on paper, so it just makes that getting in the door a little harder.
It dug at me for a long time. I dropped out probably 7, 8, 9 times. I kept going back and drugs and alcohol got in the way a lot. But the ADD and just not wanting to be there got in the way a lot too, because I didn't want to keep taking all the classes that I didn't need. Yeah. The extension of high school kind of thing. And
so I, growing up, I was always in church. I got out of high school, but still, you go into that like, oh, I'm going to be a youth minister, so you start being a chaperone on all the events. And I think everybody who kind of grows up in church kind of thinks that when they first get out, if they're involved and active in it, because it's like, you're not really done. You're not really ready to be done being involved and being active and getting to real life. And so you think, oh, well, I'm gonna stick into it by going this route. And I did have probably one of the bigger regrets that I didn't take out of high school, just not long after, was, well, one that I'm going to say now. I'm going to start with one that I don't necessarily regret, but it was an opportunity I had that I passed on. Was I went down and did MEPS. I was going to be a Marine. I got recruited. It wasn't something that I was just like growing up. I was like, oh, I'm going to be a Marine. Mm-hmm. It was one of those things. A recruiter came in, everything sounded great, go to college after, all that stuff. And went down, got an 85 on my ASVABs, and was going to go delayed entry. Well, I had like 2 signatures left to sign, and I was going to be a Marine. Mm-hmm. And the second to last one was that affidavit that says, everything that you've told us about your medical history is clear and true. And the recruiter had told me at the time, because I wasn't taking medication for it, not to mention my ADD. And so I'm sitting there and in good conscience couldn't sign that paper. And so ended up red flagging me, and they're like, well, if you go back and get your doctor to say that you don't actually need the medication, all this stuff, then we could probably push you through and all this stuff. And it just gave me the time to be like, I was kind of recruited in this. This wasn't what I am really,
right.
Like, it's not my desire, not my dream. And then, like 6 months later, another buddy of mine who, because this was 2004, so Afghanistan and all that was really big. I had a friend die in Afghanistan that, who knows, it could have been me over there. And, maybe God protected me from going in because my ADD might have got me killed. Who knows? You never know.
Yeah.
But, so that's not really the regret. The regret that I had was another opportunity. I was going to Manchac Baptist at the time, and we had a revival team come in.
Is that the big white one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it used to be Maranatha Iglesia, which is right across like Caddy Corner. That's what used to be when we first started going there. That one was built in, I want to say 2003, the white one, the big one, somewhere around then. But we had a revival team come in, and while they were there, they held singing auditions. And I was like, why not? And so I auditioned, and I had the opportunity to go tour with them.
Wow. I did notice you have a really good singing voice the other day at church.
Yeah, thank you.
That's an opera voice right there.
I appreciate it. I grew up on the hymns, so
nice.
That's my style.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity, and at the time, I had a family in the church who was willing to financially support it. And I let the little voices in my head talk a little bit and say, oh, well, you got some things that you need to pay off. You got some responsibilities back here, which really, in hindsight, I didn't. It was like $1,600 worth of stuff. That's so minuscule looking at it now. But when you're 19 years old, you're like, oh, man.
I'm going to be in debt forever.
Yeah, exactly. And I passed on it. And I do look back on that sometimes, and I'm like, what if I had gone on that? Where would my life be now? What would, same thing with the Marines in that sense. Yeah, same thing with the Marines. Yeah.
Finish college.
Yeah, and there's always those what ifs, but you got to just let those be like fleeting thoughts.
Did you ever use your voice and sing for anything or anywhere? A choir, a band, a church, something?
So I used to be in the church choir and stuff like that, and
same.
Did that. Did a few solos here and there. And funny story is that the very first date that my wife and I had, I played a video for her of me singing a song that I wrote for the church. And that was like the moment.
Before you go on, I'll just interrupt real quick. My wife and I, when we were in high school, did a duet together for a musical at church.
Oh, nice.
A love song duet.
That's funny.
And now we're married. We weren't married then. We didn't get married until 2012. But.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, if we could play it if you want to play it, but...
we'll get there.
Yeah, maybe.
Where is it?
It should still be on YouTube, but it was a song that I wrote called Take Me. I was going through a little bit of a rough patch, and it was just one of those things that I just went outside in like the front yard of the duplex that ironically Nathan, Jennifer, and myself were living in at the time. And I just sat in a chair and I grabbed the guitar, which I pretend to be okay at, and just started looking up at the stars, and just song came out, and it's just a prayer and a response from God, and it's take me, mold me, make me from the miry clay, bend me, unfold me. I'm drawing a blank on the rest of the lyrics right now. If I started singing it, I could, but it's something that I don't know if it's private on YouTube or not, but you can search under my name. Yeah, Joshua Preslar. Take Me. See, there's a band. Yeah, there's a band out of Seattle, I think.
Really?
Yeah. No, I think it's on private. It may not pop up.
That's okay.
Yeah. Either way, it's one of those things. It's so it starts off. It's silently I listen to the still small voice, but I cannot hear you, Lord, because of all the noise. Lord, I am begging you to open up my heart. Lord, I want to walk with you and forever be set apart. Take me, mold me, make me from the miry clay, bend me, unfold me, speak to my heart today. And then goes on into the next verse, and it's the continual response that in this just 5 minutes that I'm hearing back from God in this prayer. Mm-hmm. And wrote that song, played it for my wife on our first date, and I had not intended on kissing her on the first date. I planned on being the, respectful wait.
How old were you?
Oh gosh, this would have been 26.
So you were into adulthood. You weren't still teenagers
26.
or anything. Is that when y'all met? 26?
2012 is when we met, so I would have been 26.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
that's when we got married.
Yeah, and we got married 2.5 years later. So, but it was just one of those things. Like I played it for her at the end of the date. She ended up kissing me, so it was like,
hey,
there we go.
And all those rumors are true. If you can play music, you can get the girls.
Yep. But
what was going through your mind when you wrote that? Like, what was you said you were going through a rough patch?
Yeah, it was just one of those things. Like, I honestly, looking back, I don't truly remember other than just finances and, I was always that shy guy when it came to like girls and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of it was just my life isn't where I thought it was going to be at this point. And there was that prayer. And I knew that, like the whole beginning, silently I listened to hear the still small voice, but I cannot hear you, Lord, because of all the noise. So essentially it was the concept of just allowing life to be so busy that I'm not sitting there and actually listening to God. Mm-hmm. And it was more about that. It was more about my walk with God than really anything else in life. And, come to find out that we all allow that to happen way too easily, which is why I thought that song really spoke. And for a long time, my wife really thought that song could have been a really good song. It's like I think, even sent it off to a few songwriters or something like that at some point. I could be remembering that wrong, but maybe at least one. Mm-hmm. But
it's never too late.
No, it never is. And, it's one of those that I still every now and then I'll pick up the guitar and have fun just kind of picking around and playing. I always had fun just writing a few things here and there, nothing ever really serious, but that was one that just always spoke to me.
So what were you doing in your 20s in Austin?
In my 20s, well, let's rewind just a little bit. Like I said, I was never really big with the girls. Mm-hmm. And then when I was 19 years old, had this one girl who was finally interested in me. And
finally.
Yeah, finally, right? And I'm going to leave names out just because I don't want a certain person to be offended. We would be fine if we had this conversation together, but just since he's not here,
sure.
I had a friend who advised me. He said, hey, at 19, I was typical Christian. I'm going to be a virgin until, all this, and that's what I want. And, but again, opportunity never really presented itself either as much, as it did for some other people. And so my friend, he was like, hey, I just want you to know, like, be careful. Like, this girl, like, I've known her for a long time. She tends to have a history of this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I was like, dude, hey, thanks for watching out, A few weeks later, this friend is dating said girl.
I had a feeling that was coming.
Yeah. And so I had a little bit of bitterness there and a little bit of, and so at the time it was like, okay, whatever. And, 4 weeks, 6 weeks go by, whatever, their thing fizzles out. And then here she comes back showing interest again. And I was like, well, so-and-so, he told me this. Well, all he wanted to do was date her. So Bah. And so here I go, date the girl, and compromised myself, and thought I was in love, only to have 4 weeks later she cheated on me with somebody else. So I should have listened to the friend's warning. But that was
your friend just wanted to be next, and then
I mean, I don't even think it was truly necessarily that as much as like she had kind of entered our friend circle to hang out a little bit, and so the opportunities, I guess, just presented themselves. I don't think it was like as harsh as I said in the moment. I think he truly was trying to protect, and then eventually opportunity presented, and he gave into his own.
Well, women have a way of doing that too.
Oh yeah.
Men are weak.
Yes.
We are weak.
Yes,
weak
we
individuals.
Are. Yes, we are.
And when you're 19, you're really weak.
Yep.
It takes a lot.
Yeah.
So you made it pretty good.
Yeah. So then moving into the 20s, that year was actually the first year that I ever drank any sort of, well, let me rephrase that. My first alcoholic beverage, I was 2 years old.
Got to start off young.
My uncle had left a Miller Lite up on the counter.
Yeah.
And I picked it up, took one drink, said yucky soda, and poured it down the drain.
I was like, wait.
Yeah. But then when I was 19, that same year, it was kind of like, I'd now been out of the house a couple years, and whatever, what's the big deal about waiting until 21? And so I started, never really have been a huge drinker, but I definitely in my 20s drank more than any other time. Parties, beer pong, different things like that. Just doing the things that I guess I never really did in high school, which I shouldn't be doing in high school, but most people did. So I kind of,
the rite of passage kind of thing.
I kind of did that culture, hanging out with friends and drinking and doing that kind of thing. And
did you work in bars?
I didn't then. No, I didn't then. So in my 20s, let's see, I worked at several different places. So my very, very first job in my teens was Randall's, and Subway, Whataburger, and Taco Bell. So I think when I was 22,
that whole Brody Slaughter Lane corner, I worked at Marty's Hacienda. It was my last bartending job.
Yeah. Right, so I worked in that whole corner, and that Taco Bell. So I started at Taco Bell, I think I was 20, and I worked up to being an AGM. And when I was 22, I left. That's actually my most fun quit story.
Oh, let's hear that one.
So I was 22 years old. I believe I was 22, and I had a girlfriend at the time who, she was staying with me, but she was right around the corner, and it was one of those things like, she had not been feeling well. I was a mid manager, so I was like, there's another manager on duty, and so I was like, you know what, I worked myself to the point where I was going to get other stores ready for audits. So I was the AGM that would travel around to different stores to get them ready for audits. And I was at the South First location, right by where that HEB used to be at South First and Congress. Not South First and Congress, South First and William Cannon. Anyway, so I was there at that location, living at just right around the corner off South First. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to grab her some soup real quick, take her soup, come back, none the wiser. I was gone maybe 30, 45 minutes. There's another manager on duty. Well, I guess somebody didn't like the fact that I did that. It's fine. It probably in hindsight wasn't the right thing to do. But again, 22.
But you weren't hurting anything.
I wasn't hurting anything.
There was another manager there?
Yeah, there was another manager there. And so got a call from the district manager the next morning, and he was not happy with it. You know what? Let me correct. I was closing that shift, but the mid-manager was still there. That's what it was. I was closing that shift, but the mid-manager was there. So the next morning, got a call from the district manager, got a talking to, got a write-up. Wasn't really... It was just one of those things, like, at this point, I was working 75-hour weeks, making like $30,000 a year, terrible money. And I just get home, and I'm like, yeah. I worked the next day, a mid. So that was the shift I worked a mid. And the whole shift, I had the conversation with them coming into the shift. I was there working, and it was just like, I'm tired. I'm over it. And
it's fast food.
It's fast food. And so
go next door and get another job.
At 9 p.m., I get off work. I drive around the corner to where I'm living. I change my clothes. I drive back up to the store, go through the drive-thru, and say, hey, it's Josh. Meet me at the window. And they meet me at the window. I said, here's my keys, here's my card, here's my uniform. I quit. And I drove off. And I think it was the next morning, the GM at the location called me, and he was like, this is the biggest, you're going to regret this. This is the worst decision of your life. And I'm like, dude, I'm 22 years old. This can't be the worst decision of my life. Like, if this is my biggest regret, quitting Taco Bell, then I've got bigger problems.
Did you bring back a dirty uniform?
Oh, yeah. I brought back all my uniforms, but that one was dirty, yes.
Mix them all together.
And so then, to tie the story up, that wasn't the end of it. I quit. Manager was pissed, said I was making the worst decision of my life. Fast forward 8 years. I'm now married to my wife for a year, living off of Brody, and we go into the advanced auto parts that's right there. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, who's working behind the counter was my GM, Steve. And I go, oh, it's in my head. I'm like, it's been 8 years, whatever. I'm like, hey, Steve. Hey, how you doing? Josh, you remember me? He goes, yeah, I happen to remember you. You're the guy that screwed me over.
Wow.
And I was like, hey, man, I was young. Sorry. And paid out, and I left. And I was like, okay. I was like, say a little prayer for that guy, because 8 years later, man, that upset hard. Still. So, but there's stories like that in the 20s.
That's
where
some
it's
holding
like,
on to right there.
You look back and you're like, especially as a Christian, like I could have made some decisions differently to not make people feel the way that they felt.
Where were you on your walk with Christ at the time? Were you were you going to church and involved? And
I mean, I was always going to church. I was always relatively involved at certain steps, some steps more than other. But was it a true, like, all feet in? No. Mm-hmm. It was for most of my 20s, it was 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
So you felt the conviction a little bit of, I could have handled that better. But,
for sure.
But the guy deserved it kind of thing.
Yeah, at the time. I mean, more so I could have handled that better. It's been more just in recent years, where it's like, just looking back at different times in life where, I've had friendships end or relationships end, and, where I didn't necessarily always feel like I was in the wrong, and probably wasn't in several of the situations, at least not fully. But in the moment, not being able to see so much my part of it, just now having that hindsight and looking back, and I've tried to reach out to some of those people over the years and just be like, hey,
it's going to clear the air.
Like, hey, yeah, you called me an asshole at this point, and I didn't think I was, and I probably was at some capacity, and I'm sorry for that, Yeah,
I've been called those names a few times.
Yeah. So
some of them I won't be reaching back out to for an apology either.
Yeah.
But
I think that's all a part of growth, and a part of maturity is just is learning that we can't always change what's happened in our past, but we can try to make amends for it. At least say our apologies.
Right.
So
how'd you get your life back on track after quitting Taco Bell? Because that had to have been.
It was rough.
That's like a gutter moment.
Yeah, no, it was rough. I think I went and I had a buddy who was working at CVS, so I went and got a job there. Did that for a while. Jumped into trying to look more into like career sense from there. I went and I have another kind of funny story about losing a job.
Well, let's hear it.
But so from CVS, I went and I got a job in PPD, which is pharmaceutical studies. And I ended up working
White South First.
Yes, I ended up working in pharmaceutical studies in general for 7 years. But this first stint was 1.5 years. And I worked in the lab where we processed all the serum. We processed just everything. And there was one station where we would collect urine and fecal matter and stuff like that. And so occasionally we'd be back there and we'd be pooling the urine. And it's not super funny, but it's more funny in the sense of how it just went down. Is like essentially somebody accused me of mispooling urine. We had been there for 45 minutes together and nobody said anything while I was sitting there. It was after I left that somebody was like, oh, so from my point of view, I don't think I was the one that did it. I think they did.
Mispooling?
Yeah, meaning that, so essentially, like, we're in a collection period, right? So over a 24-hour period, we would collect everything that you do, pool it together, and it would have to be in your label. So mispooling would be like mixing yours with mine, essentially. So I just poured it into the wrong container is what they were saying. Well, I didn't think I had poured it into the wrong container. There's no camera shot of anything showing it. This person said it. It was their word versus mine. And essentially they were like, well, the sponsor's pissed off because they think this happened, whether it happened or not. And so somebody has to lose their job over it. And because you're the accused, we're going to let you go. But we're not going to make you not rehireable.
Okay.
I'm like, so it's literally just to save face was all it was for. And so that happened. So I went to do like electric labor for a while just to see if I wanted to go into that trade, and didn't, and ended up reaching back out to PPD like a year later and was like, hey, what do y'all think about me coming back? And I was hired back. I'm like, so, but then
Interesting.
Then I worked there. I transferred out of the lab, ended up becoming a phlebotomist, did that for a little while.
Did you have to go to school for that?
They do training on there, on site. And my wife's going to hate me for saying this, but that's where we met. She was there. And
well, that was going to be my question anyway.
I drew her blood.
Aww.
And so I always say it was love at first stick. Sorry, babe. You know? But for the longest time, she was like, let's just tell people we met on Christian Mingle. But no, I joke with her.
And you're like, I couldn't lie on an application for the Marine Corps. I'm not going to say we met on Christian Mingle.
Right. And so I was like, it's love at first stick. But no, it was good. I worked there for a while, then left and started working for another company in project management, still in phlebotomy, or still in pharmaceuticals, but in project management, and did that for a couple years. And at the same time I was doing that was when I also, before I started doing that, I started working in a restaurant for the first time, and then I was doing bartending and stuff like that, and worked 2 jobs. Left PPD, went to the new place called INC. Kind of was just part-time at the restaurant, but still kept it until our company did a merge and I was one of the layoffs. And at that point, then just went back to restaurant full-time, started bartending weddings, and just from there.
Weddings were fun.
Yeah, weddings are a lot of fun.
I did a lot of those event bartending stuff on the side from whatever bar or restaurant we were working in. The holidays come around and they're hiring everybody. Yeah. And they were paying $20 an hour at the time. Yeah. And that was in the 90s.
Oh, no, I used to make...
And plus the tips. And,
used to make really good money. Yeah. So we worked for a company that was specifically bartending out of Texas Old Town. And for the longest time, we were the exclusive bartending group there. For the first 4 or 5 years I did it.
They had some good ones there too.
Oh yeah. So I was, just doing that part time. Like I would work 60 events a year for a couple years in a row. And not going to say what I made for IRS purposes, but
no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on tips.
But no, it was good money. Like there was nights.
Oh yeah.
The best night I ever worked on a bar night was, ironically, it was a 3.5 hour bar that I made $856 on. That's not the best. My best night I ever made bartending was my last night leaving Applebee's, because I was there for 7.5 years and I just had so many regulars. But that wedding, it was a bride and groom who were supposed to get married, but like the Thursday before, this was like a Saturday or Sunday event, the Thursday before, the groom got put in the hospital. And they'd already had a bunch of people fly in, and so they were under the impression that he would be out in time, but he wasn't. And so eventually they just had the event still for their guests, and they FaceTimed in from the hospital and all this. And they just let everybody still, but it was shortened. It was shortened from a 6-hour party to like a 3.5-hour party, but the whole event was bartenders. So it was like every time they came to the bar, it was like dropping 20s, and it was, gosh, it was so easy. It was like such, and they had shortened all their bar stuff way down, so it was super easy. But yeah, so other than that, then fast forward, I had gotten out of Applebee's, and because I had started working in mortgage, and I spent a year doing both, and mortgage was starting to pick up. It was really good. I was still doing weddings, so I was technically working 3 jobs. So I got to the point where I was like, let's leave Applebee's. Did that. Mortgage was still really good. Weddings were really good. And then our owner at the wedding venue decided that she wanted more time off. And so she pulled her exclusivity rights and went to a partial. So she was a preferred still. So they ended up having 4 services. So we cut our events down by 66%. So I went from working 60 events a year to working like 20 to 30. Yeah, 20 to 30, somewhere in there. So it cut that in half. At the same time, mortgage rates started to spike. And so that income came crashing down. And then I was just doing whatever I could at the time. And as you and I were talking the other day, that was kind of where finances just really started to be a struggle. And all of this time, so let's say it's 3 years now, I think we've been at Vertical.
That's a bit
just over
long,
2
really?
or 3, just over 2 or 3. So when we had started going to Vertical, just something changed spiritually. And Nathan and I were doing the podcast, and life was really, really moving in a really good spiritual way. And when all this financial stuff came about, it was like a year and a half that I not closed a loan in the mortgage industry. And I was just driving around doing delivery one day and just cried out to God. I was like, why? Why has this been so difficult for so long? And almost instantly, not audibly, but almost, it felt like I heard God say, have you tried being thankful? And I was like, what? And so I was like immediately like looking in the Bible, thankfulness and struggle and all this. And it come across Romans, Romans 5:3-5 or 3:3-5?
Yeah, we were just talking about that.
Pull it up. Yeah. So it's, I think it's Romans 3:3-5. It could be 5:3-5. Oh no, so it's chapter 5 then. Yeah, so right there. So and not only that, this is CSB, okay. And not only that, but we boast in our afflictions, because we know that our afflictions produces endurance, endurance produces proven character, and proven character produces hope. So I read it in the NIV, and the NIV says our struggles produce perseverance. Yep. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And so I was looking at that, and I was just like, okay, all right, God, I'm going to try this thankful thing. And I said a prayer. I said, thank you for letting whatever you're trying to teach me happen right now. And I am trying to be open to listening to it. And then a week later, we got a $1,000 check in the mail from our equity of our home saying that we had overpaid for the last year. So that was a big help. But yeah, we're still going through, a little bit of struggles here and there, but things are definitely on the climb. We, through everything, got the opportunity to start our own business, which is starting to go pretty well. In our first year, we did relatively solid for gross sales in our first year, and starting to pick up already in our second. So we're just now a year in.
And that's the inflatables?
Yeah. So
cool.
The Party Play Factory. So we do all sorts of stuff. Bounce houses, soft play for toddlers, which is like tumbling and, like ball pits, those kind of things. We do photo booths, tables, tents, chairs, just try to have it all there for, to grow as fast as we can. Let's put it that way.
That's cool.
So yeah, it's kind of a summation from the 20s to now.
So you got married.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years after.
I didn't even tell that part of this getting married.
Yeah, okay. We got to get to the married part.
So my wife and I, we got together.
You sang her a song, and then she married you.
Yep, that's it. That's all it wrote. No, so we started dating in November of 2012. We went really strong for about 6 months, and then some things happened and we broke up. But we were living together. And we were still living together even though we were broken up.
Yeah.
And at the time, and at the time I was and not just living together, we were living together in a 384 square foot studio.
Oh, I don't know how that goes. My house was a little bit bigger.
So essentially, one of us sleeping on the bed, one of us sleeping on the couch
and you weren't getting along?
The same room. It's not that. It's not that we weren't getting along. Like, we were still very friendly. We were still cohabitating very well. There was just some other things, and part of that was on me. Like, she was seeing me waste potential, essentially. Yeah. And there was some stress over that. But she also said, like, through all that time that we weren't going to get back together. She, that Taylor Swift song was really popular at the time. The "We never, ever, ever," and then I'll stop right there so that we don't demonetize.
That's okay. I just don't want to hear Taylor Swift in my ear.
Yeah. So that was really big at the time. And then also what was really big at the time was Bruno Mars' "I Should Have Bought You Flowers." And she loved those songs.
That's a good song.
I love that song too. I did not love it right then because it would come on. We'd be in the car together.
Oh, no.
And it would come on and she'd turn it up and I'm sitting there like turned to the side just trying not to cry because I'd just like, why are we broken up?
Oh.
And anyway, so I started to come, she kept telling me it's not happening. I said, okay. So I'd been working at Applebee's and finally some friends were like, hey, let's go out this night. And I said, okay, let's go. And I did not know that they were taking me out to set me up with another girl. But she was there. We were doing karaoke. I was having a good time. Before I had known that, I had invited my wife along, or my ex at this point. I said, hey, do you want to come with us? And she was like, no. So I said, okay. So I go there, and this girl and I were hitting it off. And next thing I know, my wife walks in through the doors, dressed to the nines, just smoke show. But here I am thinking,
for
never.
You or to make you jealous?
Yes.
Kind of both.
Yes. Yeah, that's my answer to that. But yeah, so
this is what you're missing out on.
Yeah, I don't really honestly know. Like, even to this day, like,
there's a psychological play there.
Yeah, and so. Well, I don't show her the attention when she walks in because I'm like, we had just had this conversation earlier in the day, again, about not getting back together. I'd invited her along. She turned it down. Now I'm here talking to this other girl who's showing interest in me. And then, she shows up. And so I'm just like, okay, whatever. So I'm talking to this other girl. And so she leaves. And this girl and I were talking. And she was like, now, again, my wife and I were living together, so it was like, where are we going to go from here? So
awkward.
The girl's like, okay, well, why don't we just go back and let's hang out at my place? I said, okay, cool. So we're going back to her place. We get there and we go through the door and she's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, I'm dog sitting. I was like, okay, no big deal. I love dogs, whatever. Well, we walk in and there was dog poop all over the floor. She goes, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Let me get this cleaned up. And, we'll just have a drink or whatever. I said, okay. So I go out on the patio. It was an apartment complex. So I go out on the patio And next thing I know, this dog runs and jumps in my lap. I'm like, oh, what's up, dog? And I start to smell poop. Well, the dog had run through its own poop, had jumped all over. Now it's on my shirt, it's on my pants, it's on my legs. And, I could have, in that moment, just been like, hey, do you mind washing my clothes?
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, okay. I'm mood killed. I got to go. And so I go back and I get home and Ashley's not there. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. Like, she left long before me. Well, I go inside, I change out of the clothes, and I call her, and I say, hey, I just got back to the house, and you're not here. What time do you think you're going to be home? And I could hear in her voice she was emotional. Like, teary, just upset. Well, she had been sitting in the parking lot and watched me and this girl leave together. And then she went and drove and was parked by a school that was right around the corner from our apartment. And she was on the phone with her best friend for like 2 hours for this entire time that we were still at the karaoke and then back going to her place. And so she answers, she tells me, I said, well, come home, let's talk. Let's talk about this then. And so she comes back and we talk everything through. And she finally was like, well, what if I'm not ready for this to be over? And I said, well, that's all you've had to say this entire time. And then that was it. And so I've always said, dog spelled backward is God. God knew how to intervene that way. And I say that not just in jest right now, but I truly believe like dogs have the innate ability to show just unconditional love. And it's like, if we could just learn how to love people and love each other the way that dogs love us, my gosh, man. But
man's best friend.
Yeah. And then,
So did you get your clothes washed before she came home so she didn't have to smell the dog poop? Or did she laugh when she smelled it?
I don't know, because we didn't have a washer and dryer in that. So we had, it was they had a laundry room that we had to go wash stuff in. So I don't remember if we washed them that night or not, honestly. But it was just, I just thought it was really interesting because the whole way that, like, had I proceeded forward in a sinful manner that night with this other girl, my wife has told me we would never have gotten back together. And so the fact that dog God intervened that way, and
God and the dog,
So I mean, life hasn't been easy. Obviously, marriage isn't easy. Everybody knows that's been married, but
that's a pretty big stumbling block to get over. Was it smooth sailing after that for a while?
Yeah, I mean, we've had our fights just like anybody that's been married has their fights.
How long after that did y'all get married?
So that would have been summer of 2013. And we got back together, I guess it was that August. So we were kind of broken up for the summer. Got back together in August. And then we've been together ever since. We got married. Oh, so let's fast forward to that then. So then I proposed in the November of 2014. We were going to get married in October of the following year. So it was going to be 11-month engagement. Well, in March, I go on a mission trip, and talking to the pastor at the time, I was going to back to my original church that I grew up in, which was First Baptist Oak Hill. Now it's just Oak Hill Baptist. But I was talking to the pastor, and we were talking about everything. And of course, Ashley and I were still living together at the time. And he goes, why are you waiting? Essentially, like, you're living together, you're doing all of this. Like, why are you waiting? Why not just get married?
Up and got back together.
Yeah, he's like, why not just get married? And so I get home from the mission trip and talk to the wife, and it was kind of serendipitous timing because we had also finally gotten the quote back from our venue that we were going to go to, which was the train up in Cedar Park. We were going to do that, a 3-hour train and get married on it and everything.
We did that train a couple of years ago.
Well, their pricing had like tripled. because we had originally talked to him that December, and they were like, well, we're restructuring our pricing for the new year, so let us come back to you. And so I get back from the mission trip in March, and that's kind of the same time they had gotten back to us, like right before then, and their price was going to be like triple what we expected. And so I get back, and I was like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Like, and so she's like, yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem waiting. So we said, let's get married in May. And this is mid-March. And so we basically did we sent out invites to an engagement party for May of 2015 and did not tell people we were getting married. There were some people that knew, but mostly it was a surprise to everyone. But we did a boat on Town Lake. Ladybird Lake.
Still Town Lake.
Yeah, still Town Lake. We did a boat on Town Lake. We had it catered and everything. We played all the games that you would play at like an engagement party. And then we told people, hey, we want to go upstairs for one more game. And so everybody goes upstairs, and then we walk the aisle and get married. And so it was pretty sweet. And we came out of it. We did the dirty dancing dance out of the I do's and the lift and all.
That's great.
And then, so that was May of 2015. And here we are 10 years later.
Yeah. Did you do honeymoon?
We did just a mini moon. So we just went down to Galveston, just did something easy. The wedding night, so drained because we did so much of it DIY that we just surfed Facebook. Like we didn't, it was just like, we just want to sleep.
Yep.
But yes, I mean, we just went down to Galveston. We've done other trips since then. When we were first dating, we went to Puerto Rico, and we've done...
Puerto Rico's good.
Oh, Puerto Rico's cool.
My wife and I went there in 2013 for my sister-in-law's wedding.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah. No, Puerto Rico is really fun. We did a lot of, we did rappelling through the jungle and, zip lining all over. And it was about, got to play ultimate Frisbee with locals in Puerto Rico. So the guy who we were rappelling through the jungle with, so it was my wife and I, and then my best friend and his girlfriend. We all went on the trip together, and we were playing ultimate Frisbee all the time. We used to play in Austin sports and social leagues and stuff like that. And so we were down there, and we just happened to I don't even know how we were talking about it. And our guide was just like, "Oh, y'all play ultimate Frisbee?" And we were like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, we're playing tonight at this park in town if y'all want to come join us." And so we got done with the rappelling, and we took a cab over, and we went and played ultimate Frisbee in Puerto Rico with a bunch of locals.
That's fun.
It was pretty cool. So
I mean, what are the odds you get to do something like that?
I know
in a foreign, not really foreign country.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's pretty cool because everybody does all the other stuff that you do, and it's like, but we got to go play ultimate Frisbee with some locals.
That's fun.
But yeah. So did the mini moon. And then now it's just been the fun of life until the last 19 months where we had our little son finally.
Tell me about that.
So we, in our entire relationship, we never used any contraceptive. We just didn't. And we always had trouble. We tried for years to get pregnant, and there was always trouble there. My wife, we were believed that she had endometriosis. We never actually had the laparoscopy done, but she did have colonoscopy and things like that done that showed that she could have had, it was the potential for it there. And then she's got IBS issues and stuff too, so that just makes it even worse. But we always had trouble, and our plan was to, if she made it to 40 and we were not pregnant, we were going to start the adoption process. And that still may be on the horizon, but 6 weeks before she turned 40, we got pregnant. And there's a whole God story there too.
Let's hear it.
So like I said, we got into vertical a couple years ago and really just started to spiritually grow. Part of that just being, like I said, Nathan and I had started the podcast, and we were both growing spiritually there, because when you start to get into the Word and when you really start to look to God for lots of things, there's nothing to do except grow spiritually. Mm-hmm. And so we were growing in our spiritual walk, we were growing in our prayer walk, and leading up into it, like I said, we had been trying for years. So we got married. It was 2015, which would have been 10 years ago. So she would have been 32, about to be 33. Or no, was she 30? She's 3.5 years older than me. So I was 29, she was 33, because it had just passed her birthday. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so she's now 43. My math is off. She's 42, so she would have been 32. Let me correct that.
Chris had the same problem when he was in here. We were both trying to do math with dates, and we were like...
While you're trying to talk and tell the story. Yeah, like, it's so terrible. Anyway, so she's 42 now. And we had been trying for years. We had been, doing... track the ovulation, mm-hmm. do all of that. And it just... There was one time we think we did... And then it was never far enough along to truly say, but then she had what we believe was a miscarriage, super, super early. It was just one of those things, like it was way heavier than anything she had ever had before. Yeah. But then she messaged me one day, and this would have been in February 18th of 2023. And she messaged me and she said, "Hey, high ovulation day." And I sit there, and as a guy, I hear that, and I'm like, all right, let's go home.
February 18th, 2023?
February 18th, 2023.
I was 24 hours sober that day.
Oh, wow.
That was the day after I quit drinking.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So she calls me, and like any guy, I'm like, all right, let's go home. We're at least going to have some fun either mm-hmm. way. And so we get to the bedroom, and ready. And I sit there, and for the first time in my life, I was just like, you know what? Let's say a prayer. And we just sat on the end of the bed. And I said, God, you gave us a commandment. One of the first commandments in the Bible was to be fruitful and multiply. And my wife and I, that's all that we want right now, is we want to have a child that we can raise in your name, like and honor you with. And I said that prayer, we consummated, and then later that day I was like, you know what, now you say a prayer. And I had her say a similar prayer, and then again. And so that night we had an event with KOZ, Kids Outdoor Zone, and it was an HTL leaders meeting, and a lot of the people in that group knew what was going on. And so we drove out to Smithville, went to this barbecue, and just almost the whole night there was tears, there was people praying over us, and I did not plan on us even talking about it. My wife was the one that brought it up to one of the ladies there. Oh, no. Sorry, let me actually, this is why it got brought up. So we met one of the, not TJ Graney, Rick McGee. Mm-hmm. We met Rick McGee, and he was like, oh, do y'all have any kids? And immediately my wife, just emotional. And he was like, did I say something wrong? Mm-hmm. And so that kind of led off the whole, hey, everybody started praying. Different people were talking to us at different times. And then one of my KOZ leaders, David Porter, he said that he has 4 adopted kids, and he knew everything that we were going through. And I just told him, hey, before we leave tonight, will you just pray over us? And leading up to that, my wife had... Okay, so we've been at Vertical 2 years, because that was the same year we started going to Vertical, because that was January. And so I had shared this story in the Thursday night group. So I had shared this story. So we've been at Vertical for 2 years then. Sorry for that pause in the story.
2.5 years, really.
Yeah,
we're in the middle
2.5 years. 2.5
now.
years. So anyway, so she had been just for the first time, like really opening herself up to people at the altar, like going up and just being prayerful on it, because, you know, you get to this point in your life and you've been wanting this and it's not happening. And for me, I never lost the trust that it would happen, because I believe when I was 10 years old, God told me I would be a father and a husband. There was a book we wrote called My Story. It was all the kids in school wrote it in our 5th grade class. And in that I said I would, you know, I just knew that I'd be a father and a husband. I talked about it in there. I always felt that. I always felt like God told that and had that plan for me. But, you know, it just hadn't been happening. And I kind of accepted the fact that I guess in a sense, kind of like Abraham, I said, well, maybe this is another way. And that other way was adoption in my mind at this point, because we were so close to our plan. Well, David prays over us that night, and literally right before we leave, and we get in the car, and not 2 minutes down the road, my wife says, oh, I've got this really sharp pain in my side, something like I've never felt before. And I said, okay. I was like, what is it? She's like, I don't know how to describe it. The closest thing is to like a side sticker, like you would get, like if you just really like overran and weren't getting enough oxygen. She's like, but it's sharper than that. And I said, okay. And, you know, a few minutes later it went away and stuff like that. And then March 5th. So this was February 18th to March 5th. So she hadn't even missed a cycle yet. She takes a test unbeknownst to me, and I'm upstairs. She's downstairs in our house, and I just hear, Josh! And to me, it sounded worrisome. And so here I come running down the stairs, and I'm like, what? Is everything okay? Like, what happened? She goes, it's never said this before. And it was a pregnancy test that said positive. And I truly believe that the power of prayer is what caused that day. You know, we have tried without contraceptive for years. Even when we weren't trying, we never used contraceptives. So there was so many opportunities that moment where we said, we're going to be intentional and even challenge God against his living word. Because his word says, be fruitful, multiply. His commandment.
He'll do it.
And I have never questioned the power of prayer since that day.
That's good.
Because
it's so good.
Because man, God wants us to be connected with him. He wants us to be prayerful, and he wants us to challenge him on what he says his word is. And he will show it to us. So
what'd y'all do in that moment? Did you start crying?
Oh yeah.
You got me crying.
I don't know that either. I mean, she definitely had some crying. I don't know that I was emotional. I don't know that it was tears. It was joy for sure. But I think for me personally, because I never wavered in that belief. Like I always believed that we would have a biological child. You'd
do it.
Exactly. You know, it was I always believed we'd have a biological child, whether it was after we adopted or not. Like that was just what I believed. It was more just like it was one of those moments where you just think God is good, you know? So
any trouble with the pregnancy during that time?
There was no actual trouble with the pregnancy.
Lots of praying.
She had a rough time through it. Just not anything more, but she just had terrible nausea the whole time. Yeah. Ironically, we were going on a cruise for her 40th birthday. And so this is literally 20 days after we found out she was pregnant.
Right when the morning sickness is good and kicking in.
We couldn't do anything on the cruise that we planned. Our entire cruise essentially was just us on the boat.
Hanging out.
And
that's good and relaxing.
She had bad nausea. Well, she had bad nausea the whole time. And then the boat made it even worse. So it was just one of those things, like she's like, I don't even want to go on a cruise ever again, you know. So it is what it is. But yeah, she just had bad nausea the whole time. But we'll now fast forward to the end, and this is also another little tearjerker. I'm going to pull up something I wrote here, if I can find it here in a minute. So we get to the hospital. Our goal, we made it full term. Everything was healthy. Everything was fine. November 10th was the due date. He had not come. So we were like, okay, well, we're going to go in that night to induce if we can. Our goal was to have him on November 11th because sequences of ones or running sequences of numbers are supposed to mean your angels are watching over you. And 1111 has always been a big thing. 111, 1111. It's always been a big thing in our relationship.
444.
Exactly. And so the one specifically has always been big to us in our relationship. So he would have been born on 11/11 as the 11th grandchild.
My uncle's going to love this episode, by the way.
In our 11th year of being together.
Oh, come on.
And all of this would have been, so that was our goal, right? And so we were like,
what was his goal?
Right. And our goal was like, let's go the 10th, we'll get induced, have him on the 11th, because it was a night induction. Well, the induction doesn't take. Her cervix never softened. And so we talked to the doctor, this was the morning of the 12th now. And he was like, well, here's the thing. So I could send you home. We could try it again, but I don't want you to go more than 2 or 3 days because she's already 40 years old. And, we're very careful with how far over 40 weeks we go with that kind of age because it can be more dangerous and that kind of stuff. He said, or we could do a C-section. Well, this is now Sunday morning. And, so my wife is stressed. She's a little scared. She doesn't know, what it all entails. Like the idea of getting your body cut open at any time can be scary. And so all she wanted to do in that moment was talk to my dad. My dad is a lay pastor at First Baptist Oak Hill. So he's a very godly man. But all she wanted to do was talk to my dad. And so I said, okay. And so I looked at the time. I knew that it was kind of like towards the end of Sunday school. For those of you that remember Sunday school, my dad's church still does it.
Yep.
So he would teach. And so I sent a text to him and my stepmom. And I said, at the hospital, really need to talk to one of you. Really need to talk to Dad. Please call as fast as possible.
Were y'all close by? Were y'all at Seton Southwest?
We're at Kyle. Seton and Kyle. And they're in Oak Hill. So it's not too far. But basically just got a call. And so she talked to Dad. Dad gave her some good advice. And ultimately we decided we're going to go ahead and proceed forward with the C-section. And so I go talk to the doctor, said, hey, this is how we're going to proceed. This is like 10 in the morning, and she had just eaten at 8:30. So he was like, okay, it'll probably be early afternoon. We'll go in and we will, we'll go ahead and do the C-section. And so I was like, go back. I tell her, let her prepare. I go in to use the restroom, and then I hear the doctor's voice talking. I can't, through the door, I couldn't really hear what he was saying, but as I come out and they're like, you ready to go? And I was like, wait a second, what happened to 6 hours from now? And he goes, oh, we talked to anesthesiologist. They said with what she ate, she's probably fine. So we're just going to go ahead and do it now. I said, okay. So we go down there and they get scrubbed up. They get her in there to the point where then they can call me in. And then we go in and here comes Everett. C-section is a success. I go over to cut the umbilical cord, and then I just asked the nurse, I was like, hey, do you mind if I make an announcement in the room? And she was like, no, it's fine. Go ahead. And so I said, does everybody in the room mind stopping what they're doing except for the doctors for just a moment? Doctors, please keep stitching up my wife. Do what you got to do. But if everybody would stop for just a moment. And I said, I want to say a prayer. And so I prayed in the room. And in the prayer, I quoted 1 Samuel 1:29, For this child I have prayed, and you've answered the desires of my heart. Come to find out, my dad was preaching that morning on 1 Samuel 1:29. I had no idea that was happening. And so my son is actually named Everett Randolph Preslar II. My dad's name is Everett Randolph Preslar, who is a pastor, who was preaching on the same verse that I quoted as my son was being delivered that morning.
The grandson gets to be the second in that name.
I mean, we could have chose to call him Junior, but he's skipped a generation, so we called him a second.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah, so he's a second. You normally see it once somebody's already been born, like once they've already had like a third, then you might see it transition to like a second. I was gonna see.
That's
here.
Pretty cool.
So the night before Everett was born, I wrote a letter to him, and I was gonna read it if I could.
Yeah.
All right, dear Everett. While we haven't even met you yet, your mom and I love you more than you could ever imagine. The story of how you got here is one of great adventure. With highs and lows, it has been a long road to get to your arrival in this world. But you are the perfect example of 1 Samuel 1:29. For this child I have prayed, and the Lord has granted the desires of my heart. We can't wait to meet you and learn who it is that God has blessed us with to be stewards of his life, to see what your unique personality and gifts are, to help you grow in these gifts and learn to understand Jesus and the world. I can't wait to share my interests with you and engage you in yours. I look forward to the day that we both get to have our first catch together. I'm a Texas Rangers fan, and this year, for the first time in franchise history, they won a championship. 1961, they were established as the Washington Senators, then moved to Texas 10 years later. I'm also a Dallas Cowboys fan. We won 3 championships when I was a boy, but we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about what has happened since then. And then I put haha in parentheses. Mm-hmm. I have one sports rule for you. You cannot be a Philadelphia Eagles fan.
Amen.
No matter what no matter what your mom's family says. They're from Pennsylvania.
Oh no.
Your mother and I promise to always do our best in raising you the way that God designed. There may be times that we fail, and know that we are sorry. God has destined you to do great things. And I cannot wait to see what they are. While you are unique in your own ways, you share a great name with a man that I can only describe as Dad. I'll gather myself for a minute.
I can tell you love your dad a lot.
Yeah. There are no words to explain the impact he has had on my life. The same type of impact I know he will have on you as a grandfather. He is a man of great faith and will always be a source of counsel for you, as he has been for me. Your name also represents 3 generations before me. Everett Randolph Preslar is your name, as well as your grandfather's. Your great-grandfather was Everett, and your great-great-grandfather Randolph. All men of God and great examples of how to live a life for Christ. I hope I can continue that tradition. I vow to you to raise you as Proverbs 22:6 commands. Raise a child up in the way they should go, and when they grow old, they will not depart from it. Son, I love you. Can't wait to meet you. Love, Dad.
Beautiful.
It's hard to get through every time I read it.
This just happened to luck out that it coincided with Father's Day weekend.
Yeah.
Because now we're here at Fatherhood on your journey. Yeah. How's that been?
Incredible.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier about a dog teaching you unconditional love, I think it's hard. Relationships fail so often because we don't know how to unconditionally love. When you get a child, you truly learn what unconditional love means. Because they may, and even as they get older, we let that cloud. But when you have a baby, and when you have a child that just doesn't know wrong. You excuse the mistakes, you excuse and you just look past it, and you say, I love you. And I wish that we as people would take that and just learn from that more on how to love each other. Because if we could just look past the bad, the mistakes that are made, and just still say, I love you, that's what Christ calls us to do. When he says, love the Lord your God with all your soul strength. I can't even speak right now.
You're good.
But then love your neighbor as yourself. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to look past the mistakes, past the faults, past the flaws, and say, I love you.
He wants, that childlike innocence.
Yeah, he said, let the little children
Never
come.
in the Bible does it say we're God's adults.
No.
We're God's children. We're all God's children.
Absolutely.
So how old is he now?
19 months. 19 months tomorrow. Yep.
Are you starting to see your personality? Or
he looks
mother's?
just like me.
Yeah?
He's a mini-me. Absolutely. He's adventurous. He wants to climb on everything. He's wants to be outside every time we open the door. He's me through and through. There's bits and pieces of her, but he's identical to me. So
what's been some of the hardest parts that you've didn't expect as a father, as a new father?
Oh man. That's a tough question, because long before he ever came, like I always committed to my wife, and I told her, I was like, we always have to be first for each other. I think that's probably the hardest part, is to actually act that. Now it's I'm sure that's going to get harder as he gets older.
Yeah. It's
not so hard right now when he's young, and we can, but just making that time for each other still has probably been the hardest part. I don't know. It's a hard answer, because we had waited for it for so long.
Yeah.
The
hard part was waiting, probably. Then.
Yeah, for sure.
What's been your most favorite part?
Seeing his personality develop. Like he's not fully talking yet. He says some words. Of course, he's 19 months, so he says some words, but just the little things he does and he learns. Like, I'll call the dogs in, or I'll tap my leg or whatever. So now he goes up and he reaches his hand to say come, and then he taps his leg. The dogs can't even see him. They don't even know what's going on. They're off the deck, but he's standing at the door and he's calling the dogs.
Like father, like son.
Yeah, and just
watch our every move.
Watching his personality grow, for sure. Just being able to play with him.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
What kind of things did your father teach you that you want to pass down to him?
Oh man.
That you want to teach him? Because I heard the podcast you did, and your dad read the Donkey Daniel, and you said he read that by memory.
Yeah, he recited it.
And I didn't realize that. I thought he was reading it when I was listening to it.
No, he recited it.
And it was really long.
It was over the phone, too.
Yeah, and it was really long. And then I was like, wow, he really memorized all that. But he seemed like, I could just tell by that conversation and the way you've talked about him before in those podcasts, that you really look up to your dad. I mean, I know how that is, because my dad's the same way. I really admire him.
My father, he's the epitome of the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
When my parents divorced, my dad ultimately could have said all sorts of things about my mom if he wanted to, but he never spoke a word of her. On the other hand, vice versa, my mom did try to disparage my dad at times. Yeah. Which, that's probably the thing I respect the most, is that even though, having learned a lot of things about the relationship as we've gotten older, he very well could have and could have been rightful in doing so, but he lived by that Christian code and never once spoke ill, never wanted us to think poorly of our mother.
Right.
And I just think just the way that he lives as a Christian, you know, is just the most important thing that I could ever pass down. So.
Do you still talk to your mom?
Oh yeah. I see. I mean, okay. my mom's, that relationship has healed a lot. I mean, there was a mother wound there, for a long time, a feeling of abandonment, that, you know, we've had those conversations. One thing that my dad did really, really well when my mom first moved away was he got us in counseling. And my wife hates it because I talk everything to death now and talk it in circles. So I've had
overanalyze everything.
Oh yeah, I've had to learn how to let her have space and stuff like that. But it's never shied me away from having conversation, and I can have tough conversations. So those conversations have been had, and there's been a lot of healing. And you know, my mom actually comes over 3 times a week and watches the kids. So
yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking she was still in California.
No. She came back 2017. So, yeah. But
that's good.
Well, yeah. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's see. How has it improved your relationship with your wife now that you've had a kid? Have you seen any improvements in your bonding and your closeness?
That's really interesting, because
now that you share a human,
we share a human in that sense, and there are those moments where we're definitely like just looking at him and you know, cuddling and all sitting together, but I don't think we've had as much time for that as we would have liked, because we also started the business a year ago. So we had a 9-month-old or a 7-month-old when we decided to start a business. So there's been that like
constant go.
Yeah, exactly. So there's been, I will tell you this, if you want to put your relationship to the test ever, start a business with your wife where you're both making decisions together when you don't necessarily have the same.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
I love you, honey.
It's not terrible. I love working with my wife, and honestly, some of the best times we get to do are going to go to events. But man, it can be stressful when you're trying to say the way that you think something should go, and she's trying to say the other way. So you think, man, it's some interesting conversation for sure, and it puts you to the test. But I think that's part of why the timing of having him also was so perfect for this whole time, and God's got it all planned out, because you know, you can go through the stress of that, but then one of the things that we've been trying to make sure that we do is that every evening we sit down, we have that time as a family before he goes off to bed. And so trying to make those times for those moments makes that easier. Yeah. So.
Well, that sounds fun. Let's see. Where are we at? We're at baby. We're almost caught up.
Yeah.
What do you got going on in the future? What do you got planned?
Long term.
Since we're at the present.
Long term. We, like I mentioned it quickly earlier, is we want to get back to land. We want to get back to, so this year we started growing some of our own vegetables at home, and Ashley's been, you know, she makes her own sourdough and stuff like that. So, you know, we're always dreaming. We're always trying to do things big. We're trying to get healthier about the way. I think that's the biggest change that a kid makes you realize is that you want better for them than what we had. And we've learned a lot in this world, without trying to get into conspiracies or anything like that. We've learned a lot in this world of convenience that we've created.
Oh, yeah.
That we have to find ways to sustain ourselves, because the way prices and everything have gone, it's just an unsustainable system. And I heard it the other day put this way, and I thought it was so incredibly insightful. We spent thousands of years living off the land, and we've forgotten how to do it in 2 generations. And so you see this millennial surge of homesteading and stuff like that. I think it's a good surge. I think it's a necessary surge, because we're starting to realize that the system that we moved ourselves into is not sustainable.
Especially if the grid goes down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
even for a month.
Part of our plan is getting back to that, having land again, growing up outdoors, having the ability to live on our own if we need to. And part of that might take us out of the state. If it does, it does. We were actually, back in 2019, we were going to move out of the state. We were going to move to Tennessee. And then I broke my arm, and that kind of took all that away. That was a story we missed in there. But
we can go back.
We can go back, yeah. So I thought I was Superman, essentially. No, so I was pulling into the driveway of our apartment complex, and this would have been February of 2019. We were planning to move that fall to Cookeville, Tennessee. Awesome little town that is right off of I-40 between Nashville and Knoxville. And Mayor's a Christian, wasn't scared to hide it. Wasn't scared to display it. It was all over socials. It was a good little town. Well, this was 2019. And I pull into our driveway, which was on a slope on the frontage road of I-35. And there was a car that had its hazards on. And it looked like there was two girls there. Well, the couple cars in front of me just went right by them. And I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm just headed home. Let me hop out and see if they need help real quick. Well, right as I hop out of the car starts to roll down the hill. And now anybody who's pushed a car before, I just instantly reacted and went up and got behind the car. Well, it's going back with me because we're on a slope and nobody's then hitting the brake. So I'm going backwards with this car towards the frontage road of I-35. Fortunately, the back bumper of the car hits the front left bumper of my truck, but my arm was between the headlight and taillight. And so I looked down, and my hand, I'll show it on the camera, my hand, which is straight right here, was off to the side right there. And I looked down and think, okay, I broke my wrist. And people call it shock. I never once had high blood pressure through the whole thing. I just looked down. I knew what happened. The girl came around the car, and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I broke my wrist." Called 911, and she was like, "Oh my god, oh my god!" And I was like, "Calm down. Just call 911. Tell them I broke my wrist." And then I call my wife and say, "Hey, come to the front of the complex." And she was like, "Is everything okay? You should have been home by now." Because where I was coming from, I was only 15 minutes away. I was like, "Yeah, I broke my wrist. Just come." "How the did you break your wrist?" I was like, "Stop. Just come to the front of the complex." I was like, "Just come to the front of the complex." And so she comes up there, and she was like, "Let me. You don't have to go in the ambulance. Just look at my wrist." And she looks down. She says, "Okay, you can go in the ambulance." And so ambulance gets there, throw me in, and so get to the hospital. They give me ketamine, which that is trippy. I was out cold, and I wasn't out very long, but I was out cold. Next thing I know, I wake up and my hand's hanging in Chinese finger cuffs, and my wrist is completely reset. So my wrist was just dislocated, and I'd actually broken my radius completely through right below the wrist, and my ulna compounded.
Wow.
And so I had 2 fractures in my arm, and then the ulna actually, I think it just popped out. I don't think it broke. I think it just popped out and broke the skin there. So what I thought was broken bone through my skin right here was actually fragments of the taillight from her car sticking into my tissue. But anyway, so I wake up out of that, and the room, which is probably just a 10 by 10 room, looked like it was 100 feet long. Slowly that back wall got there, but then my dad was just sitting there when I came to. But yeah, so then that wiped out pretty much all of our funds that we had for moving later that year. And then it was kind of a blessing in disguise then too, because later that year, 2 tornadoes ended up ripping through Cookeville, and then COVID hit. And so we would have dealt with all of that being away from our family, and God just found a way to keep us around family a little while longer. So
it's another one of those situations where you go, what if we had moved to Tennessee?
Yep.
And what would life have been like? But, God works in mysterious ways. And maybe breaking your arm was what you needed to stay.
Yeah. I mean, from that point, we prayed the prayer all year long, let go and let God, So that was our motto.
Well, that basically brings us to the end, but I want to end on your podcast.
Yeah.
What made you and Nathan decide to do a podcast? I haven't met Nathan yet. Not that I'm aware of. I don't think at church.
You may have seen him in passing.
Probably seen him in passing.
But so really, it was just one of those things. It was kind of, I had this kind of the same time that we started going to vertical. It was Christmas right before that, and I just mentioned in passing to my wife at some point, hey, getting some podcast stuff would be pretty cool. Well, she got it for me for Christmas. And then the idea behind it was to do some podcasts, but also do some voiceover stuff, because I can, I've got a voice that I can do that with. And so we started playing around, and I was really listening to Unashamed a lot. At that time, and I was starting to, we got into vertical, and Spirit was moving strong, and I was just like, let's just start a podcast, and talked to my brother-in-law, and we were just like, hey, really, it was kind of out of fear. I was like, I just don't want to do it alone at first. It's so much easier to talk to somebody than try to just sit there and do like a Ben Shapiro, just talk to the camera.
Yeah. Nobody talks that fast anyway. I don't know how to get so many words in.
Yeah. Dude, I couldn't do it.
Like most people, like when I listen to Audible, I'm at 1.2, maybe 1.15, 1.1. With Ben Shapiro, you got to go down to 0.75.
Yeah.
Just to kind of keep up with what he's saying.
Yeah. But so then we just kicked off the podcast and started just trying to be real about it. It's called Unafraid with Josh and Nate. And we have 19 episodes on there. Not sure if there will be any more as the Josh and Nate format or not at this point, but the plan is to get it going again at some point.
So people have some context. Tell us who Nate is.
So Nate is my brother-in-law. He and my sister actually met through me. And they ended up getting together and got married, and they've been married 17 years now, and we've been friends for a little over 20, I think.
Wow.
So
you've gone through some stuff in life, and from what I noticed on listening to your podcast, that y'all do talk like brothers.
Yeah, we're like brothers. We are the family, the four of us, well, and then the nieces and Everett now too. We're just, that's who we live life with, essentially. I've got a couple other really close friends as well, but they tend to be the ones who we call up to do things together. We've always, for the longest time, because we didn't have kids, we would spoil, our nieces and nephews in that way. I have two stepbrothers that also have kids as well. But I don't know, something just about Jennifer being blood family and us being close, it just makes it accessible, and the opportunities are there. But so they're the people that we tend to live life with. And so it is like having a brother, which means that those times that you, and if y'all do go listen to the podcast at all,
we'll link to it in the description.
There's definite times that we hurt each other's feelings. Yeah. But, you find a way to move past it unless you truly want to disrupt that. Yeah,
I was going to ask if y'all obviously know each other really well for that long. Has there been anything that the two of you have learned about each other doing this podcast together? Because you've probably had the deep conversations before, but have you ever gotten to a deep conversation of it where other people are going to be listening to your inner thoughts?
That is a really good question. I think. So one of the earlier episodes, I did get a couple 4K cameras and, tried to do a recording where we just talk on camera. And I did learn at that point that he's a little more shy about it than I am. He kind of froze a few times, lost his train of thought. But on a deeper level, oh man, he and I lived together for several years. So we were always, we probably abused that take the stick out of your own eye before you take the log out of mine, in our relationship. So there's not a lot that I could say that we really truly learned really up until the podcast kind of ended. It ended for not for bad purposes. He had gotten a new job. Scheduling was just kind of a conflict, and we had taken a hiatus before. And one of the things that I had said is when we started up again, I wanted it to make sure it wasn't going to stop. We needed to figure out a schedule for that to happen. And then from that point, there was some things that we had talked about that. All right, I'll just be open about it. There's no reason not to be. I'm not skate around it. There was some issues that I brought up that I thought were bigger issues than they were, and I decided, hey, let's have this talk. He tried to tell me in that conversation that they were not truly concerned, but when you think you see something, you tend to believe that your eyes aren't lying to you. So I kept pushing on my end, he kept pushing on his end. The conversation really wasn't going anywhere, and so eventually he just got upset. I'm sorry, we both kind of pushed, and the conversation
it wasn't fruitful.
That's a good way to put it. Wasn't fruitful. And then there was a few weeks in a row where, like I said, we live life together, and so we're not afraid to call each other out on things. Well, it just became what he felt like was an attack on him time after time after time of hanging out. Like, at some reason, the night always ended in, hey, let's tell Nathan what we're frustrated about. And basically got to the point where he just felt unsafe. We've recently had that reconciliation conversation. It was obvious that there was some avoidance going on there on his end, from hanging out as much as usual. And, but it wasn't until just this last week that I approached him one last time about, hey, do you ever want to start this podcast up again, that he finally voiced that he had felt unsafe. And so that night we talked about it. There was some good listening, some reconciliation. So who knows? I would like to start it up at any point with or without him again at some point.
Yeah.
But we'll see where it goes from there. But one thing to be said with that is we're told in the scriptures that if we've wronged anybody, to be fast to go and correct that wrong. Don't let it take a year to figure out. If you can tell that there's signs, try to resolve it faster than that. Relationships can mend. Long-term hurt can be healed. This wasn't necessarily long-term hurt, but long-term hurt can be healed. Speaking back to reference of myself and my mom, just don't let those opportunities go to waste.
Right. Because we're not guaranteed tomorrow.
Correct.
Well, I was going to ask for, like one piece of advice for you to give to people that we could leave them with, but I think you just did.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid one.
I think we could just end there.
Okay.
You got anything you want to say to your dad for Father's Day?
Dad, happy Father's Day. I love you. I hope I am doing you proud as a son and as a father myself. I can't wait to see you this weekend and get to see you love on your grandson some more.
So. I love it. Thanks for coming in and sharing your story.
Yeah, thanks, James.
I loved it.